Picture this: roaring crowds, the thunder of hooves, the explosive crack of splintering wood. No, this isn't the Monaco Grand Prix. This is the 15th century, and you're watching the Formula One of its day, the joust. It was more than just a sport. It was a dazzling spectacle of power, wealth, and chivalry. But beneath the pageantry and gleaming steel was a financial arms race so extreme it could cripple a noble house and strain the coffers of an entire kingdom. This is the story of how a king's favorite pastime became a devastating economic bubble. So, what exactly was the joust? We all have this image of two knights in full armor charging at each other with lances, and that's the core of it, but it was far more complex. By the 15th and 16th centuries, warfare was changing. The heavily armored knight was becoming less effective on the battlefield thanks to things like the longbow and early firearms. But the ideals of chivalry and knightly prowess were stronger than ever. So the joust evolved from a military training exercise into a specialized high-stakes sport. It became the ultimate stage for a nobleman to prove his courage, skill, and most importantly, his immense wealth. And when I say immense wealth, I'm not exaggerating. Let's start with the most basic piece of equipment, the armor. The standard suit of battlefield armor was already expensive, but jousting armor? That was a completely different beast. It was custom-built, thicker, and often exquisitely decorated. Think of it like the difference between a family sedan and a Formula One car. One is practical, the other is a piece of high-performance engineering designed for one specific, dangerous purpose. A single suit of top-tier jousting armor, known as a garniture, could cost the equivalent of a small farm, complete with its buildings and livestock. We have records showing that a suit of armor for King Henry VIII cost a staggering amount, more than some of his military campaigns. These weren't just functional pieces of steel, they were works of art. Master armorers in places like Augsburg and Milan would spend months, even years, creating a single suit, often inlaying it with gold, etching intricate patterns, and tailoring it perfectly to its owner. It was a wearable status symbol, a billboard proclaiming your financial might. And you didn't just have one. A serious competitor would have multiple sets for different types of jousts, along with spare parts, because these things took a beating. Then you have the horses. You couldn't just ride any old nag into the lists. You needed a Destrier, a powerful warhorse bred for strength and temperament. These were the supercars of the medieval world, incredibly valuable and expensive to maintain. A nobleman would have a whole stable of them, each one a significant investment. Add to that the cost of custom-made horse armor, or barding, which was often just as ornate and expensive as the knight's own armor. But the spending didn't stop there. The lance itself was a consumable item. Knights would go through dozens of them in a single tournament. While not as pricey as armor, the cost added up. They were made of specific woods, like ash or fir, designed to break spectacularly upon impact. That's right, they were designed to be destroyed, a disposable luxury item for each pass. Now, let's zoom out from the individual knight to the event itself, the tournament. Hosting a tournament was a way for a king or a powerful duke to flex his financial and political muscle. Think of it like hosting the Olympics. You had to construct the jousting arena known as the lists. You needed grandstands for spectators, pavilions for the competing knights, and feasting halls. These events were multi-day festivals. There were banquets, dances, and other entertainments. The host was expected to provide lavish food and drink for hundreds, sometimes thousands of nobles and their entourages. The cost of a single major tournament could be astronomical, sometimes equaling the cost of a small war. For example, the famous Field of the Cloth of Gold in 1520, a diplomatic summit and tournament between King Henry VIII of England and King Francis I of France, was one of the most extravagant events in history. So much gold thread was used in the costumes and tents that the name was literal. Both kings nearly bankrupted their treasuries trying to outdo each other in sheer opulence. They built temporary palaces, erected fountains that flowed with wine, and competed in armor that was more jewelry than protection. It was a game of financial chicken, where winning meant spending more than your rival. This created a paradox. The joust was a sport, a game, yet the financial stakes were higher than many real-world conflicts. Why? Because it was all about honor and prestige. In the highly stratified society of the late Middle Ages, your reputation was everything. To be seen as powerful, you had to project an image of limitless wealth. Not participating, or participating with subpar equipment, would be a social death sentence. It signaled that you were falling in the ranks. So, nobles were trapped. They had to spend, even if it meant going into crippling debt. Many lesser nobles bankrupted their estates trying to keep up. They would mortgage their lands, borrow heavily from merchants, and sell off family assets, all for a chance to shine for a few days at a tournament. It was a speculative bubble, but instead of stocks or real estate, the asset was social status. The return on investment was maintaining one's place in the court's hierarchy and maybe, just maybe, catching the eye of the king and winning favor or a lucrative appointment. Even kings weren't immune. While a king like Henry VIII could absorb the costs, it put a massive strain on the royal finances. The money spent on a single tournament could have been used to build ships, pay soldiers, or invest in infrastructure. Instead, it was literally shattered into splinters on the tournament field. It was a conscious choice. The political theater of the joust was deemed more valuable at that moment than practical long-term investments. By the end of the 16th century, the jousting bubble began to pop. The sheer cost was becoming unsustainable, even for the wealthiest. Furthermore, the cultural landscape was changing. The Renaissance brought new ideals, and the Protestant Reformation challenged the ostentatious displays of the Catholic courts. The focus of courtly life began to shift from martial prowess to arts, literature, and more subtle forms of political maneuvering. The death of King Henry II of France in a jousting accident in 1559 also sent a shockwave through Europe. It was a brutal reminder that, despite all the safety measures, this was still an incredibly dangerous game. The risk, combined with the absurd cost, made many question if it was all worth it. Slowly but surely, the grand tournament faded from prominence, replaced by less violent and less expensive courtly pursuits like ballet and opera. So, the next time you see a movie with knights jousting, remember what you're really watching. It's not just a sport. It's a glimpse into a world of extreme luxury, of crippling social pressure, and of a financial bubble so immense it could make a king's treasury tremble. It was a magnificent, glittering, and ultimately unsustainable spectacle that shows how the pursuit of glory and status can sometimes come at a kingdom-sized cost. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this dive into history fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories you might not have heard before. And let me know in the comments what other historical topics you'd love to see covered. See you in the next one.